So let me just make sure it's working. And it says we're live. Yep. So where we finished last time was we read the section from chapter 16, which was, as we pointed out, this is Psalm 105 that's quoted from the Bible directly. So again, this is Psalm 105 with a little bit of Psalm 106 at the end. And this is what happens as the people under King David bring the ark into Jerusalem. And we mentioned last week, again, to remind everybody, that one of the most interesting things that is omitted from the book of Chronicles is the full kind of telling of what happens with King David's wife, the princess, because she was King Saul's daughter, and his wife, she was also a queen, Michal, who is not impressed with David's behavior and seems to look down on him tremendously, takes this opportunity to humiliate him, which is in the book of Samuel. It is not here in the book of Chronicles. It does not talk about her. It says that she was upset with him because, again, we read when he brings in the ark that she looked out the window and she despised him for it. But what was interesting about this is it never actually says that that's his wife. And it also never says that they never sleep together or that they never had a child, which is what book of Samuel says. So it's a little bit different in that way, in that regard. If you didn't have the book of Samuel, wouldn't necessarily even know they were married. But you do know from both sources that she doesn't like him. And she especially makes it clear after this incident of him dancing with the ark. And so that's kind of where we left off. I took you through to the end so you could see that it doesn't even say that they're married. We kind of left off right here after we didn't go back to the narrative after Psalm 105, 106, because again, this little bit right here is Psalm 106. And this is where we're picking up in verse 37, and we watch what David does after the ark is there. So the ark is in Jerusalem, but there's no home for said ark. That ark, the Ark of the Covenant, the Ark of Raiders of the Lost Ark, the ark where the Ten Commandments are being held within that box. Yeah, that ark. It's there in Jerusalem, but it doesn't have a home. And that's definitely the theme of what we're going to read today. And there is a version of this in the book of Samuel. And there is a important element to this that is consistent. But you'll see maybe even, I'll show you some of the differences between kind of what we take away with this. So here we are in verse 37. Rosemary, if you would read for us.
He left Asaph and his kinsmen there before the ark of the covenant of the Lord to minister before the ark regularly, as each day required, as well as Obed-Edom with their kinsmen, 68. Also Obed-Edom, son of Yedutun, and Hosa as gatekeepers. Also Zadok the priest and his fellow priests before the tabernacle of the Lord at the shrine which was in Gibeon, to sacrifice burnt offerings to the Lord on the altar of the burnt offering regularly, morning and evening, in accordance with what was prescribed in the teaching of the Lord with which he charged Israel.
Yes. And so this is telling us the ark was there and they were doing the rituals of what had happened in the tabernacle, which, the portable ark, that this was going on in Jerusalem because it had been the ark had and the tabernacle had been in Gibeon, which is not far away. It's in the tribe of Benjamin. It's in King Saul's district, which makes sense. He was the king, wanted the ark nearby him. And so now it's in Jerusalem, and now it tells us who was doing the priestly duties in front of it, which again, Zadok, right? Zadok is the ancestor of the people we call the Sadducees, the Tzaddokim. So in Hebrew, it's the Tzaddokim, his priestly line, because remember, by this time, this is literally, we're talking, this is a couple hundred years, 200 years after Aaron. There's obviously a lot of priests, and as they go on and on and on, it gets even bigger, more clans within the priestly group. And we'll have a lot of fights over who gets control of the ark. But again, according to the Torah, they're supposed to make sacrifices, which is what this book says they do. They do exactly what the Torah tells them to do in front of the ark.
With them were Haman and Yedutun and other selected men designated by name to give praise to the Lord, for his steadfast love is eternal. Haman and Yedutun had with them trumpets and cymbals to sound, and instruments for the songs of God, and the sons of Yedutun were to be at the gate. Then all the people went, every one to his home, and David returned to greet his household.
Yeah, so we know about Heman and Yedutun because there are Psalms that are the Psalms of Yedutun, or again, he's mentioned within the Psalms as part of the group that wrote the Psalms and maintained the Psalms and sang the Psalms. They were the priests who are part of the temple musicians. Again, it's not really a temple yet, it's still a shrine, but it's the pre-temple. Now, what's interesting here is the story kind of goes back and forth between what happens in this moment when they bring the ark in and what happens for days and months and years after, which is that these people were there from the moment it came into the city. And what they're trying to say is that, and they did it for a long time, that these were the people that were in charge. These are the people that took care of the ark, did the priestly duties, sang the songs, played the instruments from the moment it came into Jerusalem. So it kind of tells us that the reason why they're still doing it is because they did it from the very beginning once it came into Jerusalem. These are David's priests. That's what this is. This is the establishment of David's priests, the people that David trusts, owes favors to, likes. He's impressed with them. Whatever the reasons are, these are his priests. It's good to be David's priest, too, by the way.
When David settled in his palace, David said to the prophet Nathan, "Here I am dwelling in a house of cedar, while the ark of the covenant of the Lord is under tent cloths." Nathan said to David, "Do whatever you have in mind, for God is with you."
Okay. So we know Nathan quite a bit from the book of Samuel. He's mentioned quite often. And he's also mentioned at the beginning of Kings because he's there with David and then with Solomon. He actually is really important because he's the one who backs Solomon. So not only is he with David, but he's the one who kind of is with Bathsheba to make sure that Solomon is the son that wins. So Nathan is a very important prophet, but he's also the first prophet that we meet in the book of Chronicles. And without giving much away at this point, I will tell you, we've read 16 chapters so far. He's the only prophet you've heard of so far. You're not missing anything. If you didn't miss a class, if you missed a class or were sleeping during part of this, you have not heard the name prophet yet. And that's not a coincidence. The book of Chronicles does not really concern itself with prophets. That's very different from the book of Samuel and the book of Kings, because in the book of Samuel and the book of Kings, they're everywhere. As a matter of fact, the book of Samuel is named after a prophet. They're not here in the book of Chronicles. Well, it's not that they're not here at all, but you won't find them very much. And that is an important difference between this book and the other books. There is not the same role that prophets play that we see in the book of Kings, where I told you we don't read at all about Elijah and Elisha in the book of Chronicles, partly because they're northern prophets, but also because they're prophets. And we don't read a lot about prophets. So unfortunately, we miss that part here, which again, if we only had Chronicles, we wouldn't really know how important prophets were during this period, and we wouldn't know how politically important they were and how much they played in choosing kings and that kind of stuff. But Nathan definitely has a role to play here. He's important, but you almost get the sense that if you just read Chronicles, Nathan was like the only person who really is that important. You wouldn't get the impression that prophets are super important. It's really in the Bible, especially in the historical books, and the book and the book of prophets. We call Nevi'im prophets. It's the three divisions of leadership in Israel, right? The check and balance system we have in the ancient world is kings, right? Prophets, right? Does anyone know the last? The priests. So those are all the important leaders that are working sometimes together, sometimes against each other, but definitely all have roles to play. Priests are definitely handling a religious and spiritual part. The kings are handling the political part. And then the prophets have an interesting role to play, kind of in the middle between those two things. On one hand, they're obviously spiritual leaders, they're spiritual voices, but they also are playing a much more visible role in politics, calling out the kings, making new kings. I mean, remember, David was made king by Samuel. And then Samuel, again, as we kind of hear the way later prophets do it, they're also making kings. So really important roles to play, the prophets. And again, they were one of the three branches of leadership. I won't say government, but leadership in the ancient Israel. All right. So Nathan says to David, yeah, sure, build a temple, right? David says, I'm in a beautiful building. I've built myself a house here, a palace. We read before a couple chapters ago, the Phoenicians came in and did their build out for him, the best builders, the Phoenicians. So I have a home. Doesn't God deserve to have a home? Nathan says, yeah, do it. But here's what happens.
But that same night, the word of God came to Nathan. Go and say to my servant David, thus said the Lord, you are not the one to build a house for me to dwell in. From the day that I brought out Israel to this day, I have not dwelt in a house, but have gone from tent to tent and from one tabernacle to another. As I moved about wherever Israel did I ever reproach any of the judges of Israel, whom I appointed to care for my people Israel? Why have you not built me a house of cedar? Further, thus to my servant David. Thus said the Lord of hosts, I took you from the pasture, from following the flock, to be ruler of my people Israel. And I have been with you wherever you went, and have cut down all your enemies before you. Moreover, I will give you renown like that of the greatest men on earth. I will establish a home for my people Israel, and will plant them firm, so that they shall dwell secure and shall tremble no more. Evil men shall not wear them down any more, as in the past. Ever since I appointed judges over my people Israel, I will subdue all your enemies, and I declare to you, the Lord will build a house for you.
Yep. And so Nathan, it turns out, was wrong. Was wrong. He told David, yeah, sure. God seems to love you and always with you. Go build this great temple for him. And then God says, no, David's not building it. And you know, what's interesting here is that the book of Chronicles kind of tells the story a little differently than the book of Samuel does, because Chronicles basically makes it that God doesn't want it done because God doesn't really need it done. And and it's God's choice that it's not done now. Um, it's almost as if God is saying, David, and it's kind of what this last line says, David, you need to have your house firm. You need to kind of establish yourself. And then that's the priority. And not and then, but that's the priority. The priority is your house needs to be built. And what's interesting about it is the book of Chronicles seems to be saying, we didn't have this in the past. When we were during the time of Judges, and by extension, we still didn't have it under Saul, we couldn't rest because everyone was attacking us. All of our enemies were a problem. And I need to make sure. So far, you've cut them all down. You've done everything you needed to do with the nations around you, but that's the priority. And so it's almost as if God's saying, yeah, don't worry about me. Take care of yourself. Get your own house in order. And it's there's a very clear statement here, which is that the way we were doing things before didn't work. And that's really different from the book of Samuel in a significant way. And you know this, some of you know this. The book of Samuel is not real solid on the whole idea of a king, right? Remember, when Samuel is told by God, go make a king for the people because they want a king, Samuel's like, why? Why are you giving in to them? And God says to Samuel, they're not rejecting you. They're not rejecting the system. They're rejecting me. They just want to be like everybody else. Well, here it's completely a different tale, which is, no, God wanted the people to have a king because the other way was not working. So you really don't get that sense in Chronicles that there was any hesitation to having a king. On the contrary, it seems this is what I had to do in order for Israel to have some peace and quiet. Need to have a king. And that's the most important thing. So that's what you have here. The judges system didn't work. And again, the judges as one of the three parts, it used to be the judges, the prophets, and the priests. Now it's kings, prophets, and priests. Yeah, that didn't work. That was not good. So keep that in mind. That is a difference from the book of Samuel, is that the Chronicles, the chronicler, we love kings. Kings are necessary. How could you even think we couldn't have a king? I mean, it's just a nightmare if you don't have a king. So keep that in mind.
When your days are done and you follow your fathers, I will raise up your offspring after you, one of your own sons, and I will establish his kingship. He shall build a house for me, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be a father to him, and he shall be a son to me, but I will never withdraw my favor from him as I withdrew it from your predecessor. I will install him in my house and in my kingship forever, and his throne shall be established forever. Nathan spoke to David in accordance with all these words and all this prophecy.
So again, here it's made very clear. You will not build a temple, but one of your descendants will. Now it doesn't say it'll be Solomon, because that's, it's not necessary to say that, but it's pretty clear that this was written by somebody who also really believed in that dynasty and believed that Solomon was doing all along what God wanted, which is he's going to be the one who builds the temple. So again, God speaking through Nathan seems to be saying, my main job right now is to make sure that your dynasty is secure. And the only way for a dynasty to happen is for your kids to continue on. So the prime thing has to be your kids continuing on, because that didn't happen with Saul. Saul's sons did not become king. There was no dynasty. So it says that flat out. I did not let your predecessor have a child to continue. And remember, that child was Jonathan. That child was friends with David. So this is a pretty clear indication that The previous dynasty could not be a dynasty. It was not ready. But you, King David, you can have a dynasty. And by the way, the author of this knew that that was not such an easy thing either. Because when David has his own son Absalom lead a revolt against him, we realize that, yeah, Absalom would have become king after him, but he would have done it through essentially killing his father. It's not a great way for a dynasty to start. It doesn't set in motion really healthy governance. So this is not, if you think about it, what is being laid out here is a plan which, again, maybe obscures how difficult it really was for this to happen. This was not an easy thing. And rather than build a temple, the Bible's kind of telling us here, the chronicler's kind of telling us here, it's because they really couldn't. They had to establish a dynasty first. So we're going to read what David does now.
Then King David came and sat before the Lord, and he said, "What am I, O Lord God, and what is my family that you have brought me thus far? Yet even this, O God, has seemed too little to you, for you have spoken of your servant's house for the future. You regard me as a man of distinction, O Lord God. What more can David add regarding the honoring of your servant? You know your servant. O Lord, for your servant's sake and of your own accord, you have wrought this great thing and made known all these great things. O Lord, there is none like you, and there is no other God but you, as we have always heard. And who is like your people Israel, a unique nation on earth, whom God went and redeemed as his people, winning renown for yourself for great and marvelous deeds, driving out nations before your people, whom you redeemed from Egypt. You have established your people Israel as your very own people forever, and you, O Lord, have become their God. And now, O Lord, let your promise concerning your servant and his house be fulfilled forever, and do as you have promised. Let it be fulfilled that your name be glorified forever, in that men will say, the Lord of hosts, God of Israel, is Israel's God, and may the house of your servant David be established before you. Because you, my God, have revealed to your servant that you will build a house for him, your servant has ventured to pray to you. And now, O Lord, you are God, and you have made this gracious promise to your servant. Now it has pleased you to bless your servant's house, that it abide before you forever. For you, O Lord, have blessed and are blessed forever.
Mm-hmm. And so you can see David kind of composes a psalm or a song of appreciation, of gratitude for what God has said, which is, yeah, you don't have to worry about making a temple for me. Just make a good dynasty, establish yourself. I'm going to bless you with a solid continuation, a solid, a solid lineage. There are going to be people for hundreds of years that are going to be able to trace their rule back to you. And this is a very special thing, because that's one of the indications of stability. And as David says, this is an act of God. This is not because I'm great. It's because God has chosen me. And so there's a real sense of humility, a real sense of appreciation that this is what gets to happen to him. Now, the author of this also knows that even though David and his dynasty is established, their power will soon be greatly diminished. Because as I mentioned to you, Solomon is able to, for most of his life, keep the kingdom united, and in the north and south stay united under his rule. But his son, Rehoboam, loses the entire northern part of the kingdom, or the northern kingdom, if you will, revolts and separates again. So even though this prayer and this blessing of kingship and this dynasty gets to continue, it does not continue, at least the way in this moment that David is hoping or thinking it will continue, because it is not over really anything other than the tribe of Judah and Shimon, and the Levites and the people of Benjamin who live in this part of the country. It's not the kingship that Saul had for some of the time, and that David had for some of the time, and that Solomon had for most of the time. This is not going to be a very long unified kingdom. So that is a reality too. So let's continue. And now we're going to read about what David does as he's king, which is a little different than it is in Samuel, because in Samuel, it kind of tells us about these wars in a different way, in that the wars kind of happen before David does all of this establishment of Jerusalem. When I say establishment of Jerusalem, the political and the, his stuff, not obviously the temple being built, but the ark is there, the tabernacle is there. So let's read now David's wars. That's what we're going to be reading now, which is what David does to defeat his enemies. A lot of this is in the book of Samuel. Actually, most of this is in the book of Samuel. But maybe we'll look at how it's a little different. Okay.
Sometime afterward, David attacked the Philistines and subdued them. And David took Gath and its dependencies from the Philistines. He also defeated the Moabites. The Moabites became tributary vassals of David. David defeated Hadadezer, king of Zabahamat, who was on his way to set up his monument at the Euphrates River.
So let's just do a very, very quick little map. The little map of where these kingdoms are that we're going to be talking about. Oh, that's not the. Sorry. Yeah. So this is where we're talking about, right? Okay, so this is Jerusalem. This is Judah. Now, the northern kingdom starts here and goes up all the way up to here. But Ammon and Moab and Philistia and Edom are all around Judah, all around it. And then we go all the way up north, and this is where Aram is. This is Syria, and it goes all the way out to the Euphrates. So the Arameans, or what would be Syria today, are also related people to us, but they are a little bit more powerful than these groups, the Ammonites and Moabites and Edomites. And the Philistines, while they're powerful, are really kind of constricted along the coast. And so their territory is not very big. And so you can see the Philistines live in what today is Gaza, the Gaza Strip area, and all the way up from Ashkelon to Ashdod. These were all Philistine territories. They were ruled as city-states, very similar to the Greeks, and they were from the Aegean, the Philistines. Eventually, probably become a little bit like the Israelites, right? A little bit more Middle Eastern, but originally they were from the Aegean, from Crete, and from lived in Cyprus. So again, these areas right here are the Philistine areas. This is where Gath is. These are the main cities of the Philistine, what we call the Philistine Pentapolis. Gath is not here, but Ekron, Ashdod, Ashkelon, and Gaza are all the other of the 5 main cities of the Philistines. And we knew, of course, that David fought with the Philistines when he was running from King Saul. So let's take a look at back at the text. We can always refer back if we need to. So let's read.
David captured 1,000 chariots and 7,000 horsemen and 20,000 foot soldiers of his force. And David hamstrung all the chariot horses except for 100, which he retained.
Yeah, so when David went against Hadadezer of the Aramean king, so this Zobah Hamat is one of the Aramean kingdoms, because Aram wasn't one kingdom, it was several kingdoms. Unlike the Ammonites and Moabites, who really had not a huge territory and only had one king at a time. I mean, there might have been princes and heads of cities, but they're not organized like that. The Ammonites and Moabites are kind of organized a little bit more like the Israelites, but Aram has several kingdoms within it. Some of them seem larger and obviously more powerful than others, but Hadadezer's one is a fairly big one. Again, Hadad is the Aramean god. Hadad is like Zeus is the lightning god, is the god of rain. Hadad is the same as the name Eliezer, which is God is my help. Hadad means Hadad is my help. So you can see a lot of the names, even though the God's name is different, the name is very similar because they just put their God as the helper. And so the languages of Aram and of course Aramaic or Aramean at that time was very similar to Hebrew, and these territories are some of them are all part of Israel today. Parts of Aram were in the Golan Heights, so very similar to Syria today. And also, again, Syria's had a lot of difficulties keeping their kingdoms together and have had some problems with Israel. And you can see one of the things that Israel does after they defeat the Syrians is they hamstrung their chariot horses, which is not a very nice thing to do to a horse.
It's terrorism.
It is
they're going to have to kill the horses, but they're going to have to do it themselves.
Yes, and it's a way of essentially destroying their armaments, right? It's a way of essentially making sure that they can't attack them anymore. But yes, it is. It's a horrible way of inflicting defeat on a people. But yeah, chariots were their tanks, and so this essentially is destroying their armaments. And again, David kept some of them. Assumedly, David, doesn't have the ability to keep 1,000 chariots at this point. His son Solomon builds several garrison cities for chariots, but it doesn't seem like David really has the infrastructure for it. I'm not justifying the murder of 900 horses right now. Don't get me wrong. What I'm telling you is why didn't he take 1,000 chariot horses back? Because he had no way to take care of them. He had no way of maintaining that type of chariot force. That doesn't mean that, again, eventually the Israelites will have, the kingdom under Solomon will have several chariot towns. And each one of those chariot garrisons will have, 100, 200 horses. But it's not an easy thing to maintain. Just like today, I mean, you can't maintain a military unit or whatever. Hamas couldn't retain aircraft because they had no place to launch aircraft from. Obviously, they would have loved to have had aircraft to fight Israel. They don't have. Israel made sure that they didn't have a runway, that they didn't have a place to do that, which is why they relied on drones. So we have similar situations today where if you don't have the infrastructure for some type of armament, it doesn't matter if even you have the money, you can't handle it, right? You can't take it on. And so David makes sure that they don't have those horses anymore. And that's what he did there. So Watch what happens. Watch what the Arameans do.
And when the Arameans of Damascus came to the aid of King Hadadezer of Zobadhamat, David struck down 22,000 of the Arameans. David stationed garrisons in Aram of Damascus, and the Arameans became tributary vassals of David. The Lord gave David a victory wherever he went.
And folks, that is Damascus. That's the same city of Damascus that we have today. So you can see how old of a city Damascus is. Tremendous amount of history. Unfortunately, lots of it was destroyed in war in the last 15 years. So it's very sad that that city has been so ravaged by war. And again, these are Muslims, Alawites, Christians in some cases, Druze that are fighting for control of Syria. In that time, Syria did not have one king either. You can see Aram in Damascus has a king, and Zobah had a king, and there are other kings of Aram. So Aram isn't one political unit. There's several political units, several kings in that area, and they have alliances. We have something similar in that we had a king of Israel and Judah who sometimes get along and sometimes don't get along. But if the Syrians, if the Arameans looked at us, they might have said at one point, "Hey, the king of Israel and the king of Judah fought together." And here you can see David has the upper hand, and the Arameans become, even as far north and as far east as Damascus, they become vassals to King David. And what's very interesting is that's kind of what just happened with the Syrians in modern Syria. They have not become vassals of Israel, but they have outwardly said, I mean, publicly said, we don't want to fight with Israel anymore. It's not the same as having a peace treaty. Israel does not have a peace treaty, has never had in its history a peace treaty with Syria. But many people feel that it's coming because Syria is trying to ally itself more with the West. They've broken away from Iran because Iran no longer backs the Alawite dictatorship of the Assad family. And we might find that Syria, while not being a vassal, is definitely maybe a vassal to the United States. Part of that means they're not going to be fighting with Israel anymore. And even though Syria has not legitimately been able to be a problem for Israel, they've had a problem of allowing weapons that were constantly going from Iran to Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. That flow of weapons that came across to Syria for years is done. And that's one of the reasons too that Hezbollah came to an end. It's because they no longer had the backing of the dictatorship in Syria that made sure that they could get weapons from Iran. That no longer is happening. That strike in the crescent in the Shia crescent that went from Lebanon down to Iran has been broken effectively with what happened to Syria. And obviously that's still happening today, right? This area of Damascus is critical to Israel's security today. So it's interesting to see this. That's what happened 3,000 years ago, is Israel, when they don't have to worry about the Syrians up there, the Arameans, a little bit easier for them. And you'll see why right now.
David took the gold shields carried by Hadadezer's retinue and brought them to Jerusalem. And from Tibat and Kun, towns of Hadadezer, David took a vast amount of copper, from which Solomon made the bronze tank, the columns, and the bronze vessels.
Yeah, yeah. So this was clearly written by somebody who knew what happened. Just so you know, I didn't say that because I knew this line was coming, which is, it just said, we know that Solomon's is going to be king, right? So back when it said that your son is going to build the temple, this just told us the name of the guy that brought the temple. So it's a little bit of an anachronism. It's okay, because again, we know the book of Chronicles is a unit, goes all the way to the end of the dynasty of King David and then beyond to the return during King Cyrus. But right here, it's told you this bronze that David took from the Syrians was used by his son Solomon to make the beautiful bronze vessels, especially this beautiful bath that was used in the temple by Solomon. That's where it came from. It came from the Arameans, which what better way to show that you're in control of people by taking their treasures and turning them into parts for your temple. People did it to us, and we did it to them.
When King Tu of Hamath heard that David had defeated the entire army of King Hadadezer of Zobah, he sent his son Hadaram to King David to greet him and to congratulate him on his military victory over Hadadezer, for Hadadezer had been at war with Tob. He brought with him all manner of gold, silver, and copper objects.
So that tells you that some Arameans did not like other Arameans, because King Tau is a Aramean. He's from Hamat, which is also one of the cities that's in modern day Syria today. Yeah, so he's like, oh yeah, I like King David. He put Hadadezer back in his place. So he's celebrating King David again for beating one of his own kinsmen.
King David dedicated these to the Lord, along with the other silver and gold that he had taken from all the nations, from Edom, Moab, and Ammon, from the Philistines and the Amalekites. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, struck down Edom in the Valley of Salt, 18,000 in all.
So,
He stationed,
sorry.
he stationed garrisons in Edom, and all the Edomites became vassals of David. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went.
Yep. So you can see all the people, including the Edomites. These are large, according to this, I mean, thousands and thousands of people.
David reigned over all Israel, and David executed true justice among all his people. Joab, son of Zeruiah, was commander of the army. Jehoshaphat, son of Ahilud, was recorder. Zadok, son of Ahituv, and Abimelech, son of Abiatar, were priests. Shavshah was scribe. Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, was commander of the Keratites and the Peletites, and David's sons were first ministers of the king.
Yeah, and so here we get this little couple verses of after we read about these battles, and we're not done with reading about the battles, by the way. But we have these few verses that tell us again about how David did this, right? He established people over his army. One of them again was Joab, who you can see. Zeruiah, that's his brother, right? Abishai. There were three brothers, Asahel, Abishai, and Joab. They're David's cousins, and Joab is the most important of them because he's the commander of the whole army. He's his general, he's his chief of staff of the military. Jehoshaphat was the recorder, was his scribe. But you can also see that he has his own priests, right? Zadok and Avimelech. He has a scribe, Shavshah, who is, again, also a chronicler or some type of, inner court guy. And then, in addition to his sons who were ministers who helped him, we have this guy, Benaiah, who's the head of the Cretim and the Platim. Now, there's real kind of questions about what this is. There's legitimate issues of, like, what is this that they're talking about here? Does anybody remember? We kind of talked about it a long time ago, but does anybody remember what this is? Anybody? Well, we think that these are actually Philistines. They are mentioned in the book of Samuel and the book of Kings. And here we come across them here, again, as Cretim, Platim. Platim could be again, a version of Philistine. And the Cretim could be, again, people from Crete. We're not 100% sure. Later versions and translations kind of obscure this to basically be that they're just some type of fighters. They're definitely fighters. We know they're fighters based on where we see them in Samuel and Kings. But they seem to be mercenaries. They seem to be a professional army that that King David has. Up until this period of time, we don't have professional soldiers in Israel. Doesn't mean we have capable soldiers. We have judges and people who lead the Israelites into battle, but we don't have a professional army, meaning we don't have people that are paid to be soldiers all the time. And we don't have something like this, which is something like a Praetorian Guard, something like an elite force that is with the king all the time. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
So now he's got an army that doesn't have any conflicts if he sends them against his own people.
Correct. These aren't tribal folk. These are not people from his tribe, and they're not people from any tribe. These are people who have no issue if they're told to go, quash a rebellion, quell a rebellion that they have no issue going in and taking care of business. It also means that David can trust them as much as he's hired them. But, there's something about this which, why do you need to do this? You need to do this if you believe that there's a need to have this. You don't pay for a professional inner protection force unless you need it. And so David has this.
Yeah, the private security detail.
Yeah.
What's wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. It just indicates the fact that he needs to have it.
I would think every head of state.
But we haven't had it yet. No Israelite has had it. Now, again, we've only had one other king. But one of the things that you could say about Israel before they had a king is by not having a professional army, number one, they don't have to feed that professional army. They don't have to maintain that professional army. There's not a tax revenue, if you will, that's raised to maintain that army. But again, people look at it as if you're saying, normally when we went into battle, the farmers and the guys out in the fields who were taking care of sheep took their slings, took their bow and arrow, they took their spears, and they went out in a battle, and sometimes they weren't very good. Creating a professional army is definitely something that indicates another level of ambition, right? And so we know that he wants to make sure that all of his enemies are not going to be a threat, and on the contrary, that he can actually get money from them as vassals. So there is a way of paying for this. But it's an interesting situation, because if you have it, if you need to have it, then you're going to do certain things with it. And what oftentimes happens when you have a professional army is you have to keep them working, because the idea of letting them sit around and get lazy, keep them working. And I think a lot of times in history, we've seen where people say, we're not going to have these people, we're not going to maintain this army without doing something with it. I'm not saying we've done that before in the United States. I think we've actually, for an empire, and we are an empire, de facto, whatever you want to say, we're an empire. We're maybe arguably the empire right now. We've been very, very restrained with the use of our military, I would say, compared to to other empires in history. But there is this issue that, you have an army for a reason. And so you'll see what happens here. The chronicler doesn't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it, but understand that there's consequences for it. You'll see what the consequences are. Again, without judgment, there's no really judgment, but you'll see what the consequences are. Again, if these are non-Israelites, it also sends a message that, as David knew when he was a mercenary for the other side, this is a way to make sure you don't have people who have loyalties elsewhere. So let's see what happens with this army, if you will.
Sometime afterward, Nahash, the king of the Ammonites, died, and his son succeeded him as king. David said, I will keep faith with Hanun, son of Nahash, since his father kept faith with me. David sent messengers with condolences to him over his father. But when David's courtiers came to the land of Ammon to Hanun, condolences, the Ammonite officials said to Hanun, do you think David is really honoring your father just because he sent you men with condolences? Why, it is to explore, to subvert, and to spy out the land that his courtiers have come to you. So Hanun seized David's courtiers, shaved them, and cut away half their garments up to the buttocks, and sent them off. When David was told about the men, he dispatched others to meet them, for the men were greatly embarrassed, and the king gave orders, stay in Jericho until your beards grow back. Then you can return.
Yeah. Now, again, one of the reasons why I think this was written by somebody who knew this happened, and this is a quote, a direct quote from the book of Samuel. This situation with the Ammonites, it has a level of detail to it that is interesting because it tells us a little bit about how people used to humiliate their enemies, just cut off their beards and cut off their clothes. That's interesting, from cultural standpoint, but it also shows us that the person who wrote this was writing it from the standpoint of, this is how we got into this situation. And I know that this is how we got into the situation. So there seems to be a level of detail here, which is, it seems to be, in my opinion, very contemporaneous to when this happened. It just has that sense of, like, it doesn't just say he fought a war with the Ammonites because they humiliated us. They humiliated our ambassadors. This is what happened. And again, these things happened in the ancient world all the time. You can read about them in history. And to some extent, they happen a little bit today, though little less, happens a little less, in the sense that we fight wars, it seems to me, a little less now because somebody disgraced somebody else over a banquet, or that somebody took somebody else's wife because they felt entitled to her as their queen, that kind of thing. That tends to happen less today. In my estimation, it happens less today. I mean, there were entire wars that were fought in Europe that cost hundreds of thousands of lives because somebody married somebody's consort. Obviously, that's the Trojan War was fought over that. But yeah, I mean, this is diplomacy the way it used to be handled, which was stuff like this would happen. So let's see what happens to the Ammonites.
The Ammonites realized that they had incurred the wrath of David. So Hanun and the Ammonites sent 1,000 silver talents to hire chariots and horsemen from Aram Naharaim, Aram Maacah, and Zobah. They hired 32,000 chariots, the king of Maacah and his army, who came and encamped before Medeba. The Ammonites were mobilized from their cities and came to do battle.
So this is the Ammonites hired the Arameans, the people just north of them in Syria, right? So Ammon is in Amman. That's Amman, Jordan. They went to the Syrians hired their people, paid for them, right? Paid for them to come and fight for them, some of the Aramean kingdoms. And yeah, let's see what happens.
On learning this, David sent out Joab and the whole army, including the professional fighters. The Ammonites marched out and took up their battle position at the entrance of the city, while the kings who came took their stand separately in the open.
And there you can see David sent out his army, and it says including, but I wouldn't put that. Whatever, it was clear that his fighters, his professional army went out. And it seems like, again, maybe it was the whole professional army, maybe it was the whole army, including the reserves and the people that get called up to battle. But it definitely says that the professional army came in.
Joab saw that there was a battle line against him, both front and rear. So he made a selection from all the picked men of Israel and arrayed them against the Arameans. And the rest of the troops he put under the command of his brother Abishai and arrayed them against the Ammonites. Joab said, "If the Arameans prove too strong for me, you come to my aid. And if the Ammonites prove too strong for you, I will come to your aid."
So again, they split their forces. Yoav splits them with his brother, who obviously he trusts very much. He basically says, look, if one of us gets into trouble, the other will send forces. So, that way, neither one of us get overwhelmed. All right, let's see what happens.
Let us be strong and resolute for the sake of our people and the towns of our God, and the Lord will do what he deems right. Joab and the troops with him marched into battle against the Arameans, who fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Arameans had fled, they too fled before his brother Abishai and withdrew into the city. So Joab went to Jerusalem. When the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel, they sent messengers to bring out the Arameans from across the Euphrates. Shaphat, Hadadezer's army commander, led them. David was informed of it. He assembled all Israel, crossed the Jordan, and came and took up positions against them. David drew up his forces against Aram, and they fought with him.
Yeah, so let's make it real clear what just happened. The the Ammonites hired the Arameans to fight for them. They failed, right? David's army, not David yet, David's army under his chief of staff and his brother, and Joab and his brother, they went to battle, crushed them. The Arameans left in battle. They fled. They went and got their other Aramean national, their allies, their other Arameans. They got them, and including from the other side of the Euphrates River, because the Aramean kingdoms are all around that area of Syria and into Iraq. And again, there's a lot of them. They go into battle. And this time David goes into battle. Okay, so the Joab and his army come home because they've won. But because of this victory that they've had, now the Arameans are all upset. They're all like, we better do something. And so they come into battle, and now David gets this is very clear, all of Israel. This is the tribal confederation armies. These are the reserves. These are the people who are the farmers, who are the people who have to get called up in the case of a battle. They all go across the Jordan River, and they go into battle against Aramean.
Hey, Rabbi, can you scroll up? Who was surrounded?
Where?
Scroll up. No, farther up. Farther. One of them was surrounded, and yet their enemy fled. I find that kind of proof to no.
So where?
I don't know. Scroll.
Both front and rear, I see.
Both front and rear. Joab saw that there was a battle line against him.
Yeah. So that's when they first go into battle, right? They're surrounded. But what they did is that's where I said they split their forces. So Joab took one side with him, and then and then his brother Abishai took the other. And they said, look, if either of us are having a problem, we'll send troops back to you on the other side. Because again, they split into two directions.
So the Arameans were on one side and the Ammonites were on the other.
Ammonites are on the other. So
I got it.
we assume that, I mean, it doesn't have to be north and south because
right, wherever.
It could have been anywhere, but
right.
The Arameans are in the north, the Ammonites are in the south, but they are surrounded. They basically say, look, rather than go into battle against one of them and crush one and then come back, we'll split it right now and we'll see how it goes. Now, again, it just shows you that, God's on their side and that they're more powerful, they're better trained, whatever. They crush them. But again, the next
it doesn't say they crushed them. They all retreated. It didn't say there was a battle. I didn't see that. Did you?
Oh yeah, so it says well, that they fled.
They fled.
It could be that no one ever got killed, but generally speaking, there was somebody that died before they started fleeing. But
so
it doesn't say how many died. It does not. You're right.
So it's implied there's some type of battle.
It doesn't say how, but it does appear that it wasn't just that they fled, because the word that's used here, when the Arameans saw that they had been routed by Israel. Now, usually the word routed, and again, the word here is the word in Hebrew is nigfu, which is usually like massacred. I mean, it could be translated that way. But it could also be had fallen before them, right? It could be that they, but assumedly it's like they didn't just flee; that they got routed. That's a good translation. Nigfu is a good translation. So again, the Arameans are really, really ticked off. So what happened is the Ammonites brought in the Arameans as a paid ally. The Arameans are so crushed that they decide to get the rest of their Aramean brothers to fight with Israel, with David's army. I'll say Israel this time. They say Israel. It's led by the tribe of Judah, but it's a unified monarchy. They go against Israel. That's the word that's used here, and they're going to fight. Right? They're going to fight on the other side of the Jordan River. They're not in Israel. They're on the Jordanian side of the Jordan. And so now this is clear now you're going to see what the losses were.
But the Arameans were put to flight by Israel. David killed 7,000 Aramean charioteers and 40,000 footmen. He also killed Shafak, the army commander. And when all the vassals of Hadadezer saw that they had been routed by Israel, they submitted to David and became his vassals. And the Arameans would not help the Ammonites anymore.
And that's what happens when you defeat an army so bad that they basically say, yeah, we're done. We're not going to fight with them anymore. And that's essentially, again, it doesn't always happen, where we get to have a modern example of something that happened. But 6 months ago, a little more than 6 months ago now, but in the last year, Hezbollah was attacking Israel from the north because they were showing their support with Hamas and Gaza. And Israel said, look, if you want to be part of this battle, fine. But we're going to go to war against you. And they did. They crushed Hezbollah, and Hezbollah was not able to fight on behalf of Hamas anymore. And that was a huge victory for Israel, because we're actually going to see it in a few weeks. We're actually going to tour some of the kibbutzim that got hit by Hezbollah. Hezbollah made the northern part of Israel unlivable for Israel for a year. Over a year, a little over a year. From right after October 7th to about almost basically the time that we went to Israel in January 2025, you could not live in much of the northern area of Israel, in the Galilee. And so there are entire kibbutzim that were leveled during this period of time because Hezbollah decided to fight with them. And Hezbollah stopped fighting with them after Israel killed all their leaders. It's not exactly the same, but it's kind of the same. Not exactly the same, but similar enough that you go, oh yeah, when it says they wouldn't help them anymore, that's what that means. This is not our fight anymore. We don't need this. We're not going to lose any more people. Because where did this all start? This all started because the Ammonites decided to humiliate some of our ambassadors. This didn't have to happen. All these people died because the Ammonites decided they were going to send a message to us. And if they had just paid the tribute in the first place, none of this would have happened. So the Arameans end up getting dragged into a war with Israel. That again, after they lost, they said, yeah, this was not worth it. Definitely not worth it. Because they now have to pay King David. So that's what being a vassal means. Now you're paying every year to leave, so that we don't attack you anymore. And again, this is the way you pay for your army. You pay for your army. I don't want to say this is extortion, but kind of extortion. In a way, it's national extortion, which is you'll pay us and we won't attack you. We won't take your fields from you, whatever. There's a cost for that.
Was David not trying to expand his kingdom?
So that's an interesting thing. Like, he doesn't seem to do that. Solomon does. Solomon does seem to want to expand his kingdom. David doesn't seem to have ambitions like that. David really is just trying to create peace and quiet around his borders. And again, to maintain that order, have these countries pay them. And again, I would make the argument you pay for your army to be able to be there, and if they need to be, to take care of business. And I mean that, like, this is the way you can maintain your army that you need to have, unless you're going to have a group of people that get called up into battle out of their fields every so often, and that's not really going to be effective. Look, that's how the Roman Empire was able to make an empire, by creating an army that could be stationed all over the world. You have to have that. King David does not have the ability to create an army that's going to be all over the world, or even all over the region. But King Solomon does seem to have some of those ambitions. And so one of the things he does is he establishes garrison cities throughout his country and throughout the territory that he controls. He's really, his ambition is really to extend the borders and to make sure that, when they go into battle, this is not when they have to go into battle, they're prepared. And quite frankly, it sends a message. It sends a message to the Arameans, for example. If you have a garrison city with chariots, we don't really need to do anything other than send a message to those people to go attack you. We don't have to call up our army out of Jerusalem. We don't have to march 3 days or a week to go into battle with you. We'll just send this garrison out to take care of you. So Solomon did it, not David. David doesn't do that. David starts that process by having a professional army. He does not garrison it all over the place. He still has to bring it out of Jerusalem, it seems. We have no text that says David had his army stationed in other parts of the country.
At the turn of the year, the season when kings go out to battle, Joab led out the army force and devastated the land of Ammon, and then besieged Rabbah, while David remained in Jerusalem. Joab reduced Rabbah and left it in ruins. David took the crown from the head of their king. He found that it weighed a talent of gold, and in it were precious stones. It was placed on David's head. He also carried off a vast amount of booty from the city.
Yeah, so
I don't know. That kind of looks like expansion to me.
So he doesn't, yeah, but he doesn't, no, it's very important though, because he doesn't send his army to stay in Rabbah. He's taken, he's taken their stuff, but when you really expand into another country, I mean, I don't mean to, look, they asked for this. didn't have to start a fight with us. They did. And so, yeah, David takes their stuff. And David doesn't even go out to battle, right? David's not interested in it, but he gets the crown, which is I guess this beautiful Ammonite crown is now a Judean crown. That's, the English used to do that all the time, right? They have a really big stone, a really big diamond that they took from India. Hey, that's going in the crown. That's what they did. The Ottomans did that. Everybody, takes something from somebody they defeat and puts it in their crown. Yeah. Rabbah, by the way, is the city of Ammon. So Rabbah is the main city of the Ammonites. It means the great city. Rabbah is the great city. Yeah. That's David's battle against the Ammonites.
He led out the people who lived there, and he hacked them with saws and iron threshing boards and axes. David did thus to all the towns of Ammon. Then David and all the troops returned to Jerusalem.
Oh, wait. I just want to make one point, by the way, too. Now, this is obviously a very gruesome situation. David didn't expect this to happen. David didn't ask this to happen. David had a very good relationship, it said, with Nahash, with Hanun's dad. This didn't have to happen. And so David going medieval on the people of Ammon, I guess it's pre-medieval, it's Bronze Age. He went Bronze Age on them. When he does this, it's a battle that didn't have to happen. So,
well, I don't know. Listen, he didn't just get a wired, an email saying, "Hey, should I move forward with this massacre?" I mean, it had to have taken at least a month for a writer to get back and forth, and then he had to think about it a little bit. So,
no. Remember, Ammon to Jerusalem is a day and a half horse. It's not that far. This is close enough that David really just, on the other side of the Jordan River, he just wants peace. He doesn't need these people. He doesn't need this. He didn't need this. I mean, well, you can make the argument he didn't, because it seems like he's at peace with them before they do this stuff. It becomes, again, you could read into it that David wanted to make an example of the Ammonites. There are those who say that David makes an example of the Ammonites so that nobody else, the Edomites, the Moabites, that nobody will get out of line again. But it doesn't seem like David had an issue with the Ammonites to begin with. It wasn't like he singled them out because he just really didn't like them, or that they were bad to him. On the contrary, it says he didn't have an issue with them. But yeah, what happens is not good. But it's not the only people that David goes to war against.
After this, fighting broke out with the Philistines at Gezer. That was when Sibbecai the Hushathite killed Sippai, a descendant of Raphaim, and they were humbled. Again, there was fighting with the Philistines, and Elhanan, son of Yair, killed Lachmi, the brother of Goliath the Gittite. His spear had a haft like a weaver's beam.
Yeah, so it seems like Goliath had a big brother. He had another giant brother who also is killed in battle by one of the Israelites. And these are other giants. These are other really big guys that die in battle. It's really important that I point this out. We're now in chapter 20 of Chronicles. Not one time did it say that David beat Goliath in Chronicles. You didn't miss it. Didn't say that. Now, again, Goliath being mentioned here seems to imply that we know who Goliath is. I get it. Maybe they just didn't retell the story. But keep that in mind as we go through Chronicles, Goliath. And these guys, which is, we're reading that Goliath wasn't just an aberration. There's a whole group of people like this that are enormous. Let's put it that way. They're giants. And in some cases seem to have there seems to be some genetic component to this. And the Philistines used these people in battle. Again, maybe for those contests where, we'll send one fighter against one fighter, and if the one wins, then everybody else can go home and you lost. And they did that stuff back in the Greek period. We know that. And the Philistines are kind of Greek people. So maybe that's why they do that stuff, that's their culture. They believe that a person, fighting, two people fighting can end the whole battle.
Once again, there was fighting at Gath. There was a giant of a man who had 24 fingers and toes, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot. He too was descended from the Rapha. When he taunted Israel, Jonathan, son of David's brother Shimea, killed him. These were descended from the Rapha and Gath, and they fell by the hands of David and his men.
Yeah. So these are other giants. There's a whole kind of family of them. They're Rephaim. They're from Rapha. Interesting. Rapha are a people here. They're a ethnicity, if you will, a group of giants. But it's interesting. Rapha is a city in the Gaza Strip, but it's just a coincidence. It's not the same word, but it is interesting. It's the same area.
Not very specific how he was killed, though.
No, these battles are not well told, or these incidents are not really well told. It's kind of like, this is when this stuff happens, which seems to be like, these stories a little bit. It feels like a little bit, because again, it says, this was the time when this stuff happened, right? Which is like, those times, right? These were the times that these kind of things happen, right? That was when, that was the time when that happened. That's when that happened. So yeah, there's not a whole lot of description. Now we're going to finish today with this story. I wasn't sure we'd get to chapter 21, but this is a really interesting chapter. And we'll take a look at how it's different from the book of Samuel. So, well, actually, you know what? Before I do that, let's read the story in chapter 21. Really important story, arguably the most important difference between Samuel and Chronicles. Well, in the two stories are told, in the fact that stories are omitted, like Bathsheba's story or the Michal story being severely edited. This is an interesting, different way of telling the story. Significant. And again, I think some people would say it's probably the most important one. So let's read.
Satan arose against Israel and incited David to number Israel. David said to Joab and to the commanders of the army, "Go and count Israel from Beersheba to Dan, and bring me information as to their number." Joab answered, "May the Lord increase his people 100-fold. My lord king, are they not all subjects of my lord? Why should my lord require this? Why should it be a cause of guilt for Israel?" However, the king's command to Joab remained firm. So Joab set out and traversed all Israel. He then came to Jerusalem.
Now, this is the census that David takes. He's not supposed to do this. We'll talk about that factor in a moment of like why he does it, but he's not supposed to do it. And he is not supposed to do it because he's not given permission to do it, and no one is supposed to count Israel. Yoav reminds him of that. Yoav tells him, don't do it. Don't do it. But David persists and does it anyways. So Yoav, who we know has no issue killing people, he's pretty bloodthirsty. He's so bloodthirsty that as we read, when David dies on his deathbed, he tells Solomon, kill Yoav because I don't trust him. That's how bloodthirsty Yoav is. Yoav Yoav kills Absalom in cold blood after David explicitly told him not to. He does it anyways. So Yoav has no issue not listening to David. And as you can see here, David has no issue not listening to Yoav, but they're very close. They're cousins. They have a very important bond. They work together. Yoav is brought into the inner circle, but yet David also is scared of him to some extent, but also has no issue saying no to him. Okay, here's what happens.
Now scroll.
Yep.
Yoav reported to David the number of the people that had been recorded. All Israel comprised 1,100,000 ready to draw the sword, while in Judah there were 470,000 men ready to draw the sword.
Right. And by the way, that puts our men from the age of about 20 to 50, and it puts us at about a little over 1.5 million. That's a possibility. It seems a little bit high, but it seems like it's possible that in both the northern and southern kingdom, that there are about that many people that can draw a sword, which puts the population probably closer to about 4 or 5 million. If you add women and children and older people, older men, it seems a little bit high for the archaeology, for the numbers that we would get from what we believe were inhabited cities during that period. But it's maybe more reflective of what it was during the time of the Chronicles, 500 years later. But okay, it's not ridiculous. It's not 10 times higher. But notice, by the way, too, they broke up. How many people were in each area? How many men of arms were in both areas? So you can see, based on these numbers, even if they're not 100% accurate, we can extrapolate from this that the chronicler felt, and it probably is true from the archaeology that we have, that the northern kingdom, that the northern part of our people at the time, the north, was about twice as big as the south. That the 10 tribes to the north, were about twice as big as Judah and Simon and Benjamin in the south. Okay, so it's a 2-to-1 advantage numerically, roughly. But you can see, are they really united? Not if you're drawing up their numbers separately. And by the way, what's the purpose of the census? To find out how many soldiers you have. To find out how much you can tax somebody. It's never for a good reason. It's never going to help the people. It's only going to help the king. And David took advantage of his power to do this. Let's watch what happens.
He did not record among them Levi and Benjamin because the king's command had become repugnant to Yoav. God was displeased about this matter, and he struck Israel.
Yeah, so Yoav didn't even finish the job. He didn't even really do all the counting, because he didn't count the tribe of Benjamin, and he didn't count the Levites. But this is not good, because God is not happy.
David said to God, I have sinned grievously in having done this thing. Please remit the guilt of your servant, for I have acted foolishly. The Lord ordered Gad, David's seer, go and tell David, thus said the Lord, I offer you 3 things. Choose one of them, and I will bring it upon you.
Now, this is crazy. This is crazy. One of David's prophets, another prophet, his name is Gad, like the tribe of Israel, like the son of Jacob, God. I'm going to give you 3 punishments. You pick which one of these punishments you want. But you're getting one of these. This is like the reverse of 3 wishes. You're going to have something bad happen to you. You pick one of the 3. Wow. This is pick your poison.
Gad came to David and told him, "Thus said the Lord, select for yourself a 3-year famine, or that you be swept away 3 months before your adversaries with the sword of your enemies overtaking you, or 3 days of the sword of the Lord, pestilence in the land, the angel of the Lord wreaking destruction throughout the territory of Israel. Now, consider what reply I shall take back to him who sent me."
So that's your choice. You got a choice. 3 years of famine, threes, right? Number 3 is important here. 3 months. Um,
3 months of losing wars.
yeah. Or 3 days of disease. Now, those are your choices. 3 years, 3 months, or 3 days. I mean, most rational people, if they hear this kind of stuff, are going to go, I'm going with the 3 days. Give me the smallest amount of punishment, time-wise, right? Give me the smallest amount of time that I have to deal with punishment. So I think I can get through it if it's only 3 days. I mean, 3 years, who knows? So that's your choice, right? That you're given choices. What are you going to do? So here's
David said to God, "I am in great distress. Let me fall into the hands of the Lord, for his compassion is very great, and let me not fall into the hands of men." The Lord sent a pestilence upon Israel, and 70,000 men fell in Israel. God sent an angel to Jerusalem to destroy it, but as he was about to wreak destruction, the Lord saw and renounced further punishment and said to the destroying angel, "Enough, stay your hand." The angel of the Lord was then standing by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. David looked up and saw the angel of the Lord standing between heaven and earth with a drawn sword in his hand directed against Jerusalem. David and the elders, covered in sackcloth, threw themselves on their faces. David said to God, "Was it not I alone who ordered the numbering of the people? I alone am guilty and have caused severe harm, but these sheep, what have they done? O Lord my God, let your hand fall upon me and my father's house, and let not your people be plagued." The angel of the Lord told God to inform David that David should go and set up an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. David went up, following God's instructions, which he had delivered in the name of the Lord. Ornan too saw the angel. His 4 sons who were with him hid themselves while Ornan kept on threshing wheat. David came to Ornan. When Ornan looked up, he saw David and came off the threshing floor and bowed low to David with his face to the ground. David said to Ornan, "Sell me the site of the threshing floor that I may build on it an altar to the Lord. Sell it to me at the full price, that the plague against the people will be checked." Ornan said to David, "Take it, and let my lord the king do whatever he sees fit. See, I donate oxen for burnt offerings and the threshing boards for wood, as well as wheat for a meal offering. I donate all of it." But King David replied to Ornan, "No, I will buy them at the full price. I cannot make a present to the Lord of what belongs to you, or sacrifice a burnt offering that has cost me nothing." So David paid Ornan for the site 600 shekels worth of gold. And David built there an altar to the Lord and sacrificed burnt offerings and offerings of well-being. He invoked the Lord, who answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of burnt offerings. The Lord ordered the angel to return his sword to its sheath. At that time, when David saw that the Lord answered him at the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, then he sacrificed there. For the tabernacle of the Lord, which Moses had made in the wilderness, and the altar of burnt offerings were at that time in the shrine at Gibeon, and David was unable to go to it to worship God because he was terrified by the sword of the angel of the Lord.
Yeah. And so what's interesting here is that read the next line.
David said, "Here will be the house of the Lord, and here the altar of burnt offerings for Israel."
Yeah, so according to this story, which is a different story than what we read before about how the ark came into Jerusalem and where it was left, this place was chosen because it was where the plague stopped. Now, the plague very clearly was punishment for what David did with the census. And David, of course, is very humble and is very David-like, which is, don't punish everybody, David. God, I made the mistake. And so he's very successful at getting God to calm down after this happens. But again, it seems like it has to happen this way, where the plague is punishment. Now, we just read the story in Chronicles that says that Satan rose against Israel and incited David. Now, in case you're wondering, did you miss something? No. Aside from the book of Job, this is the only time that we hear of a Satan doing anything. In the book of Job, Satan is an adversary, but he only can do what God tells him to do, and he kind of pushes God to see if Job is really a good person or not. This is Satan encourages David to do a census, and it's almost as if it's saying the devil made him do it, which is not what the book of Samuel says. God's anger flared up against Israel, and God incited David against them, saying, "Go and number Israel and Judah." So, of course, you look here, and the note says, look at what Chronicles says. So Chronicles says Satan makes David do it. Samuel says God made him do it. Now, we assume that because of everything that we've seen, the chronicler has the book of Samuel in front of him when he's doing this. Chronicler doesn't want to say that God did this. And so it's been changed. This is a major difference. It's not just a major difference because it's a different word and because there's a different reason for it. This is the first and really the only time that we see the devil making people do things in the Bible. And it's such a weird occurrence of it because it's the only time it's used. It's the only time that Satan makes an appearance here. And it seems so different from what we have in Samuel, where it's not Satan at all. It's God doing it. Now, you could argue God works through Satan and does it that way. It's not that different. That's the traditional answer for it. But it definitely seems that the author of Chronicles doesn't want to make it seem like God is responsible for having David make a very destructive decision. I won't say a bad decision. This is a terrible decision. This is a destructive decision. In the book of Samuel, it seems as though God wanted David to get in trouble. And the chronicler doesn't want to have that. Chronicler's not going to have David. They're not buying into the fact that David does this, even to some extent on his own idea. That Satan puts the idea in David's head to go do it. And this just gets David into this whole world of trouble. And look what happens here. In the story in Samuel, it just says that David told Joab to go make the rounds and take a census. And of course, similar thing, right? Similar line. Again, why are you doing this? Right? Right? similar. But in the book of Samuel, you can see this whole discussion of where they went. And then what's interesting is you get this different number. You get 1,100,000 in Chronicles, and you get 800,000 in Samuel. You get 470,000 and 500,000 there. You could say that's a rounding. That's just an estimate. But this one seems intentionally high, or it is different. Also, this one says right here that Yoav didn't record the Levites and Benjaminites. It just doesn't do it. Doesn't say that here. It has the exact same words that David says. I think there might be one different word in this. Yeah. In Chronicles it says et hadavar hazeh, and in Samuel it says va'ata Adonai ha'avar na, and it doesn't have the et hadavar hazeh. So it's missing the et hadavar hazeh, this thing. It's the only thing that's missing is et hadavar is not in this one. And you could argue that that's like, it's not necessary. It's not a necessary word that you have in here, that you have here, that you didn't have here. But the rest of it is the same. I've acted foolishly. Ki niskalti ameod. It's the same words, right? Forgive the transgression, the guilt of your servant. It's exactly the same. So it's virtually the same exact thing that David says, which is, I made a mistake. I really screwed up. And then you have the same thing with this guy Gad, right? The three things that you have a choice of. It's virtually the same. But look at what David's response is here. This is a minor difference. But in Samuel, it says, let us fall into the hands of God. Where in Chronicles, it says, let me fall into the hands of God. Now, it's one letter difference. It's not a huge difference, but it seems as though, and it's a little different. It's slightly different about falling into the hands of man. That's why it's translated a little different, but it's almost the same. But it is interesting that in Samuel it says, "Let us fall into the hands of God." With "Let me fall into the hands of God" is the part we just read in Chronicles. So it's a little different, and it's almost as if David's saying, in this version, I take responsibility for it. It's an interesting idea, though, when you read it in Chronicles, that difference is, I mean, if you don't know that it's there, you wouldn't catch it. But what's interesting about it is, with everything being about me, he is essentially saying, and it's really clear in Chronicles, I trust God more than I trust other people. And the reason that he chooses to fall into the hand of God is that when the plague is happening, remember, he goes and and confronts the angel and says, stop, stop. And it does. God does stop the angel. It's not the angel stops, God stops the angel. But there's this kind of, maybe you get a little bit more in Chronicles, this idea that maybe God will stop. But if I turn myself over to human agency, I don't know that I can talk somebody who's going to kill me or kill my people into laying off. But God, I might be able to stop God from being as destructive. And that is what happens. So the same amount of people in both cases die. 70,000. And here in Chronicles, it just says in Israel. In Samuel, it's a little bit more descriptive, from the north to the south, from the furthest city in the north, Dan, all the way down to Beersheba in the south. They're pretty much the same thing. And again, this stopping of the angel at the threshing floor. Now, it is a slightly different name. In the book of Chronicles, he's known as Ornan. In the book of Samuel, right? His name is slightly different. It's basically the same name. It's the kind of slightly, slightly maybe more informal word, Aruna, instead of Ornan. But it's clear it's the same person, Aruna the Jebusite. Now, what's interesting is that he was not an Israelite. He was a Canaanite, but he's somebody who's already worshiping God. And of course, this is, according to the story that we just get from here, is, and again, it's a lot of it's the same. This in Chronicles is very clear that this is now going to be the place where the temple will be built. Here will be the house of the Lord, and here the altar of burnt offerings for the Lord. This will be the bite. This will be the house. This is the temple. This is the permanent building. Will be here where the plague was checked. Now look, in Samuel, this is where again, it wasn't broken by us. The Jewish community did not have two Samuels. It had one book of Samuel, but the Christians broke the book of Samuel here. Actually, excuse me, not the book of Samuel. This is the end of the book of Samuel. This is where Kings starts after this. This is not Samuel. This is the end of the book of Samuel. For us, it's not even the end of the book of Chronicles. First Chronicles, sorry. But yes, this is where the book of Samuel, 2 Samuel ends. And it's where, again, in the book of Kings, the next chapter of our text is the book of Kings. So here in Chronicles, where we're going to read next week, because we're going to finish off here, this is where David essentially says, I'm going to build a temple. And now you have Solomon taking over. In the book of Kings, the next words after the words of the plague being checked, and that that this is the place, is that David is advanced in years, and this is the end of his life. Now, we don't have this part in the book of Chronicles. We don't have these wonderful stories of David as the old man being comforted by a beautiful young woman who's keeping him warm. But we do have the introduction of Solomon. We don't really get that in Chronicles. All of a sudden, Solomon's taken over. So I will tell you that next week we will be in person and we will read the beginning of Chronicles chapter 22. And we will have a chance to see what the way Chronicles does it. It sets up the temple, and that's what we're going to read about next week. The building of the temple, which in the Chronicles version is really David turning it over to Solomon, and like it's a seamless transition. It's not really what we have in the book of Samuel, and it's not the story. And the version we have in Samuel is also probably not the real story, which is how did this one son of all the sons get to be the one who's in charge? It was a miracle. Now, I will say as we wrap up, the story we just read of the angel stopping this plague or making the plague and then stopping the plague is not something that we see a lot in the Bible at this stage, which are miracles, which are acts of God that we can actually say, oh, that's supernatural. We do not see them in this part of the Bible. It's not that you missed it or missed a day or were sleeping through it. There is no miracle that happens like this where we go, that sounds a lot like Exodus. That sounds a lot like the stuff that God did in the wilderness, right? Or in Egypt, or or did back in the day when God's doing miracles for people. This stuff doesn't happen a lot. This is a miracle that some people see, right? Not everybody sees the angel. Not everybody sees the angel. Some people see the angel and they're overcome by it. It's very moving for them, but it's not a miracle that everybody sees, which is also significant in that early on in the Bible, we have miracles that everybody sees. Now we have miracles that a smaller group of people see. And it's also one of these miracles where, I mean, obviously it's not a good miracle either. It's a plague, but it's a miracle where you'd go, this is not the level of everybody getting food or the Red Sea parting or, again, massive amounts of hail and locusts coming. This is a 3-day plague, which is terrible. I mean, 70,000 people died. It's a terrible plague, but it's also something where, again, not everybody is going to see it. Not everybody's going to feel it. And it tells you a little bit about how they saw miracles, which they don't happen a lot. God's not doing these kind of things a lot. So again, folks, it's very rare to see this kind of thing happen. It's very rare to see Satan. It's even more rare to see Satan even mentioned. And so kind of keep in mind that what we're seeing in the Bible, what we're seeing develop here is a new way to relate to God and a new way for people to maybe take on more responsibility, even within the Bible. We've talked about it. We talked about Wednesday night in the Talmud and Midrash class that the Midrash and the Talmud, and within the Talmud, tries to make very clear that people are supposed to take on responsibility. The Bible itself really starts to convey that. Even though, again, Chronicles, you could say, kind of gets David off the hook by saying Satan encouraged him to do it. But again, I look at it this way. There's not very much description of how Satan does this. I think it's the kind of thing where people say, why the hell would David have done this? And literally, why the hell? Why the hell would somebody have, it defies logic. And when someone does something that doesn't make any sense to them, they go, I don't know, the devil made me do it. There was no logic behind it. I didn't do it because it benefited me necessarily, or because I thought about the consequences to it. The devil made me do it. And people use, that we still use that phrase. So,
yeah, but that didn't come from this, did it?
No,
I mean, that's an interesting point.
No, it didn't come from this, but it allows us to say in certain cases, right? We don't know why somebody did it. It doesn't make any sense. They just did something so stupid, so destructive to themselves or to somebody else. And you go, why would they do that? And you just go, it's almost supernatural. It just defies logic that someone would do something so stupid. So unfortunately, This is where David goes off the rails. Notice, by the way, it doesn't tell us about David stealing someone's wife, right? That's not here. But again, that affected a small group of people. This very bad decision David made to do a census affects everybody. And it is one why, again, it reminds us that in Judaism, we very, very much, and again, we really frown on censuses and number taking. And it's one of the reasons why there are people in this country who are not Jewish, but who are influenced by the biblical mandates on this, are very against census taking and against being counted. Because there definitely seems to be a religious reason for it, but it also seems to, again, reflect this idea that it's never in your best interest to be counted. It never works out well. So folks, with that, make yourself count. Don't be counted on by somebody else. Don't be a number. And again, we'll see you next week in person and online. And thank you everybody for being here.
Thank you.